Hi everyone, this is Miss Carvalho, and today we're going to look at solving two-step equations. So up until today, we've been solving equations that had one step. We only had to do one thing to figure out what the variable was. So to do that, I'm going to talk about me going on vacation. Yes, so this is going to be called the do-undo method. All right, so you're going to think, okay, I'm packing for my favorite vacation spot. Okay, looks like the beach for me. And when I pack, I want to pack my favorite clothes in the bottom first in my luggage to make sure that I pack my favorite clothes. And then I pack the rest of my clothes on top. Okay. And then when I get to my favorite vacation spot, then I'm going to unpack my luggage and think about me unpacking my suitcase. Whatever I've put on the top is what I have to take out first, right? And then I've got to take out the next thing. And my favorite clothes are on the bottom. So how is this going to help us with where's my mouse? Okay. With equations, let me show you. All right, so here's our luggage, and here's our equation down here in the corner, and 3x plus 7. So the x is going to be our favorite clothing. So your favorite shirt, your favorite jacket, your favorite pants, whatever it is, that's going to go into my luggage first, and it's going to be at the bottom of our suitcase. And then we're going to pack in order of operations order. So whatever comes next in order of operations. And in this case, the times 3 is what happens to this x first. Like if we were following order of operations, whatever this number is, if this was a 2, let's just say, we would multiply 3 by 2 first before we add 7, right? Multiplication before addition. So I'm going to put times 3 because that's my next clothing, right? So my times 3 comes next. And then my plus 7. So this is another item of clothing. This is my favorite one. It's my favorite one. But I'm going to put all this other stuff that's with the X, I'm going to pack it in my suitcase. So the plus 7 comes last. Now to undo, when I get to my favorite location, got on the plane, got to the beach, I'm there, I'm in the hotel, I'm going to unpack. So when I go to unpack my bag, I'm going to take this one out first. And when I do that, I have to flip it over for some reason and do the opposite. So instead of plus 7, guys, we're going to subtract 7. So that's what I'm going to do first to solve this equation. I'll show you how that works. And then I got to do the opposite of times 3. What's the opposite of times 3? Divide by 3. So that's what I'm going to do second to solve this equation. And when I do those two things, then I get to take out my favorite piece, and he's done. All right, so what does that mean? Let's look at a real math problem, but hopefully this luggage thing kind of helps stick in your head and mean something. So here we go. Step 1, you're still going to draw a line through the equal sign so you can see the two sides better, and it helps us see your two sides better too. Then you're going to write what happens to the variable. You're going to write the do or the pack. When we're packing the luggage, it's what you're doing, right? It's the steps you're doing to pack. And then we're going to write the undo or the unpack. So we're going to write those steps. We're going to pack it, we're going to unpack it, and then that helps us go backwards and do the opposite operations to isolate the variable. Opposite operations, so write this on your notes. To isolate just means get the variable by its side. That says opposite operations. So the opposite operations are addition and subtraction, and the other opposite operations are multiplication and division. And then we just solved the equation by using the steps that we listed for the unpack. Okay, so let's look at this first problem on your, there we go. Okay, so first we're going to pack, right? We're going to see there's our favorite piece of clothing. He's the X. So we're going to first draw a line down the middle of the equal sign. And then here's our favorite clothing, X. So we're going to see what happens to him and pack our bag. So draw a line through the equal sign, write the do. So what happened to my favorite item of clothing when I put him in the bottom? There he is. Then it got multiplied by a 2 because multiplication comes before subtraction. So that's my second favorite clothing, right? So I put him in next. And then the -5 gets packed last in my suitcase. And now I'm going to do step 3. Step 3, which is undo or unpack. Okay, so when I undo or unpack, I do the opposite and I go backwards, because to unpack, I can't just go right back down here. So I'm going to get rid of this -5 first by adding 5. Remember to do the opposite. Then I'm going to take out this item of clothing, and to do that, I got to do the opposite of -2, and I'm going to divide by 2. So this is my order. Add 5 first. Add 5 on this side of my equal sign. Add 5 on this side of my equal sign. Now, for the last 2 days, when you did that, all you were left with was an X. But not now. There's more stuff we have to unpack. Instead of just one item with my favorite thing, there's 2. And that 2X you have to bring down here when we rewrite what's left. You have to show that step. So write that on your paper. And so I did the +5. Now I got to unpack and do a -2 to get rid of this 2. And there you go. Those are the 2 steps. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. And remember, you can always check. I could put this 8 right here. 2 times 8 is 16, and 16 minus 5 is 11. So both sides are equal when X equals 8. All right, let's try another one. I'm hoping this unpacking helps. All right, here we go. So we got 2.8 equals -2.4 times n plus 4. So find my variable. It's on the right side. Draw a line down the middle, and then we're going to write the do and the undo. Okay, so here's my line. Here's my variable, my favorite item of clothing. He goes in the bottom. What happens to him first? He gets multiplied by a -2.4. He gets multiplied by a -2.4. And then he gets added to 4 if we're following order of operations and packing my bag correctly. And now we're going to undo the packing. Okay, so I got to undo my +4 first. He comes out, so I got to do the opposite and subtract 4 on both sides. That's the first step to solving this equation. You can't get rid of this 2.4 first. We have to get rid of this because we're unpacking. We're doing reverse order of operations. So then you're going to use Desmos or your calculator. You're going to do 2.8 minus 4, and that gives you -1.2. And on this side, we're still left with our -2.4 times n. Remember, this gets canceled out, but not that -2.4. Not until I do the opposite of timesing a -2.4, which is dividing by a -2.4. So I'm going to divide both sides by a -2.4 as my second step. And that finally gets my n all by itself. I can finally take that out of my bag. And then -1.2 divided by a -2.4 is 0.5. Okay, you got to have all those steps, all right? Let's try the next one. So I've got -13. So first step, draw a line so I could see my 2 steps. Find my favorite piece of clothing. There's my X. He gets packed first. Then order of operations, he gets multiplied by a 4, and there's a minus sign in front of this 4. So really it's like adding a -4 times X. So I'm going to say that the second thing that happened to my variable, like if I'm doing order of operations over here, he gets multiplied by a -4 first, and then he gets, look at this sign, subtracting 13. Remember the sign in front of the number. is the sign. Like this is a negative 13, so we got to do the opposite of that. So let's unpack my suitcase. Negative 13 or minus 13, what's the opposite of that? Plus 13. So I'm going to do that first. Plus 13 on both sides. Draw the little suitcase off to the side if it helps. And pack your X, and now we're going to unpack. So when I add 13 on both sides, guys, that gets rid of this. But I'm still left with this negative 4 times X. And 11 plus 13 is 24. All right, still got to go unpack. There's still some stuff left to unpack, and that's my times a negative 4. What's the opposite of times a negative 4? Dividing by a negative 4. So I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 4. This is just like the one step we did the other day, because this leaves us with X, and 24 divided by a negative 4 is negative 6. And if I plugged my negative 6 up in here, this whole equation would be true. Negative 13 plus 4 times negative 6 is going to equal 11 on my calculator. Okay, let's try a couple more. Hopefully the packing is helping. Okay, so we've got draw a line down the equal side, pack and unpack. Oh, go back. Okay, here we go. Draw a line. Let's pack and say, oh, there's my favorite piece. And this time he gets divided by a 6 first. If I'm following order of operations, he gets divided by 6 first, and then he gets, this is a positive 1 because there's no sign in front of it, right? So that's a plus 1. Okay, now I have to unpack so I could see how to solve it. The packing is what happened to the W. The unpacking is how I solve the equation. So I got to get rid of this guy first and subtract 1 on both sides. So I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides, and 13 minus 1 is 12. And I'm left with W divided by 6 over here. Don't forget about the dividing by 6. We haven't gotten rid of that yet until we unpack him and make him a times 6. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. And 6 times 12 is 72. And W divided by 6 times 6 is just 1W. All right, let's try these two guys. Draw a line down the middle. All right, I'm going to draw a little suitcase off to the side. And I'm going to pack my X in there first. And what happens to my X? He gets multiplied by a negative 3. That's following order of operations. He gets multiplied by a negative 3. And then he gets added to a 9. Unpack. What am I going to do to solve? I'm going to subtract 9 first. I'm going to subtract 9 first. So that gets rid of this, but I'm left with a negative 3x. And on this side, negative 12 minus 9. If you do that on your calculator, negative 12 minus 9, remember, it's keep change. So that's really a negative 21. Use your calculator when you can. Okay, then I got to get rid of, oops, I forgot to go unpack. I got to unpack my times a negative 3, which is divide by a negative 3 on both sides. Divide by a negative 3 on both sides. That leaves me with 1, and that leaves me with a positive 7 on the right side. Go ahead and try this right side. Maybe pause the video and then come back and see if you got your stuff right. All right, guys, how'd you do? Here's our packing. There's my favorite clothes, X at the bottom. He got divided by 3 first and subtracted by 12 second. So when I go to unpack, I got to add 12 on both sides first. Then I got to multiply both sides by 3. And then I'm left with X equals 6. All right, let's try. I think we have one more practice slide. Draw a line down the middle. Let's pack the luggage. Here's my favorite shirt, X. Order of operations is going to make me multiply him by a negative 5 first and then get added to 9 second. So when I go to unpack, I got to do the opposite of plus 9 first to solve it and subtract 9 on both sides. And 3 minus 9 is negative 6. and I'm left with a negative 5x because this is 0. So that's what I'm left with on that side. Now I got to go unpack my times a negative 5. The opposite of times is dividing by a negative 5. That side equals 1, and negative 6 divided by negative 5 is 6/5, which you can probably leave it at 6/5 or 1.2. Both are fine. All right, try this one on the right. Pause the video here and then come back and see if you're good. All right, guys, how'd you do? I, of course, left you with a really hard one. So there's my x, and there's no number in front of this x. So really, he was multiplied by a negative 1, which is hard to tell. So if you left that part off, that's okay. Let me show you what I mean. If you just said he was added to 15, that's the only thing that happened, then we subtract 15 on both sides, and you're left with a negative x. And remember, last class period, we learned there's 2 ways to get rid of that minus sign in front of the x. You divide both sides by a negative 1, or you just look at this and say, oh, I just have to flip the signs on both sides. So make this a positive x and make this positive 8 a negative 8. Both ways were okay. All right, I hope that helped. Don't think there's any more. Oh, do you guys have? Maybe you do have one more. So let's do these two. Yeah, one more. So let's do these two really quick. All right, so line down the middle. Whoa, come back. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna go through these two problems, but this one is actually a much harder problem than the practice you're gonna do today. Okay, both of these kind of are. So I'm just gonna talk through them really quick. But basically, when you pack it up this time, here's my favorite shirt. But this big fraction means I have to pack the minus 12 first and then divide by 3. So this one looks way different than the other ones that we've done today. So that's why I'm kind of saying we're not going to do this hard of practice today. But basically, you should multiply both sides by 3 first to get rid of that dividing by 3. So negative 30 will be left on this side, and x minus 12 will be left on this side. Then we got to get rid of the minus 12 by adding 12. So we actually flipped and kind of did the opposite than all those other problems we did. So this is a negative 18, and this is x. So this one's a little bit harder because we're multiplying first. That's the first problem. But that's what happens when the x gets packed with a minus 12 first. All right, let's look at this one. And here's my x, and he gets multiplied by a 2/3 first, and then he gets subtracted by 12. So I'm going to do unpack, and I'm going to add 12 first to solve. And 8 plus 12 is 20, and I'm left with 2/3 x on the right side. Okay, now there was 2 ways we learned to get rid of the fraction. The first one was to multiply by the reciprocal on both sides, or separate it and multiply both sides by 3 first and then divide by 2 second. I left it up to you. Whatever way you think made more sense to you, and then 60 divided by 2 is 3. Either way, you should get that, okay? All right, guys, hope that helped. 2-step, it's pretty easy. You're packing the x, and then you're unpacking the x to solve it. All right, let's do some practice problems today.